So this little video is on matplotlib effectively, and it's actually to do with a Stack Overflow question that I came about on, which is, well, it was about forcing pan zoom to constrain the x-axis. Okay, it wasn't written in the best English, but it's good enough as a question, and actually most importantly is the code that's written in here. So the first thing that I do, basically, I want the histogram. Only can drag, or it should be can only drag. It's written by a French person, I believe, so excuse the grammar there. The can only drag the pan in the range of the data and not out of the range. It's something to do with the X scrolling. But anyway, the first thing I want to do is take a look at the code. So I take this code and I copy that code and I will put it straight into VS Code to test that it's working. I actually did something else afterwards, but we'll go into this. So I paste that into VS Code. I just want to see that it's working. So I'll zoom in a little bit there. And the first thing is, I kind of like just look at the syntax and Control Plus, I'll zoom in a little bit. But things like this, where it's not color coded, is a little bit worrying for me in the sense that maybe isn't going to work in some way. So, and in particular, if I do something like he's created this class, and this class has got one thing in it, it's got one function in it, and nothing else, a class my axis or class for the axis. But if I do matplotlib, and then, which is perfectly allowable because line number 3 is matplotlib, and then dot, this is kind of like all of the methods and attributes that are available to matplotlib from that library. And I would expect to see in there with a dot something like dot axis, right? But I don't. Now, sometimes it works like this and sometimes it doesn't. And generally speaking, I like to make sure that the methods and attributes are available. But anyway, we'll go along with this. I don't know if this even gets called in the code. So aside from that, I kind of like have another little browse down, or we should have a little browse down that has to like how the code is written. And I see this piece here, which is a bit concerning because it's really, really long. But basically the reason why I believe is because pretty much this is it looks like it's a string here. Maybe I can break it down, but that's just a massive string, and I presume it goes from here until, if I scroll across, until here, so it's this massively long F string. I might have constructed that in a different way, just so that it fits into the 70 characters here and doesn't like sprawl right over the line. But I guess that's fine. That goes to, I don't even know where oh yeah, we see down here, if I do control, I'm not even control, let's try and do a double control. Down here, it says what line we're on. Well, we know what line we're on, that would be like line number 72, but this was just a column. But if I keep going out now, right, we've got this really, really long thing here, which is, I don't know, 200 and it's over here 219 characters wide. So quite a long line. It's I guess it's allowable, whatever. But I see a lot of these white things here, so they're kind of like not picked up plot.gc, and I get less comfort in it because it's kind of like when we make whatever classes, when we use our classes, when we use our imports for different modules, generally speaking, it's comforting to see. So if I just did like import math, I'm just picking one for example, but any of these, then I'll do like math dots, and I should be able to see everything that's available, and then I select no, that it's working, and it comes out on my linting thing as yellow like this. So that's kind of like how I know that it's there. So if I try to do math and then dots and then something that didn't exist, so like A, B, right, that doesn't exist now. It's not a natural method that's available. It's not seen somehow in the IntelliSense. That gives me a level of disconcern, but nonetheless I'm going to run this and assume that it works. And the reason why is because it does work and it gives something quite nice. So I run this piece of code, and it's taking a little bit of time, so have to bear with it. And it plots out this histogram over here, which is quite nice. And I'm like, okay, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, so that's quite cute on the histogram, because I've not seen that before really on matplotlib. Maybe I knew it existed, but here, if I click on the bars, it actually creates a nice little label, and the label's got an arrow, and the arrow points to the top center of the bars in the bar plot. So that's basically, you know, it's a chunky piece of code for just plotting a bar chart, but that's what it actually does. I think the person's query is actually that somehow the axis, he hasn't got control over the axis, so like it goes out of the scale, and I think he always wants it to be in the scale. That's what it appeared to be. If I click on that one, I don't know if I move it, does that centralize it around there? Don't know. But anyway, yeah, I think the gist of the question is I want it to be inside there. But anyways, it's just an interesting view of matplotlib in general. So that's kind of like running of this piece of code. And here is, I believe that long line was this annotation, this cursors part. So the code isn't labeled. So as a reader of it, maybe it's obvious and I should know. So this one here is zoom graph. And again, like events, I'm not sure what event is. It says any. And because it says any, when it's if event.xdata, so maybe event is something of a, I guess it's, you know, a matplotlib feature. So I'd want to type hint it so that I get this pulled in correctly. So, but I get what this might be, or the user might get what this might be, because it says zoom graph over here. Plot histogram, well, that should do it. This is a massively long line. Do we have to decrypt it? Is it obvious what it does? It's the cursor.patches. Maybe I'm just assuming that that's what it's the pointing part, and it's generating that label because it does this set annotation and dot set artist or something. So I'm presuming it does that. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit now with a couple of control minuses to look at the actual structure of the code. And if I click on this one, sometimes you can break the class. Yeah, here, that's one class. That is a second class. And then it looks like there's a couple of functions outside of the class. So there's a function here and a function here. And this projection thing just lies in the body of the code. And I wonder if there isn't a name equals main. So this is running like a script effectively. So the class, this class is created. This class is created. This class is created. This thing here could potentially be at the top, I imagine. I'll get rid of my math thing because we don't need that. This thing here could have been. I presume it could have been here. Nope. Because my axis wasn't created. Okay. I see. Okay, fine. That's why. X. I should have spotted that. This matplotlib here, dot projections dot register projection, my axis is actually calling this class here, this class of the axes. So, and again, like this matplotlib dot projections, maybe it's the way that matplotlib is called because you've got matplotlib.pyplot.plt, and I wonder if in the imports, import, because matplotlib is split into lots of modules because it is a very complete thing. We could go into matplotlib. I've done it in a future video, but matplotlib and then dot projections. Maybe that would have been doing that would have been a bit clearer, because then this projections turns, and I don't know if you notice, but the color of it turns and the IntelliSense pops up. Right, I'm kind of like a bit more comfortable with something like this if it's going to be used, which is then, because then I could do, instead of having matplotlib just in general, I've got the projections, right, which is proj. I've named it as proj. So the change of the line of code. So I've just introduced this extra piece here, just so that we haven't exposed all of matplotlib over here, and that meant that I could use this projections line now over here, which, this is the thing about it, if we do it in this like more ordered way, if I now do proj and then dot, it looks like it exposes the features in the way that I wanted it, so it's kind of like recognized, which is then I guess projections register projections. I just register projections there, register projection, so it looks like that now. And then my axes. So that's kind of like, I'm a little bit more comfortable with something like this. I comment this one out now. Now, if we've done it there, we've also got matplotlib axes as well. So because he's using a whole bunch of different features, so import matplotlib dot axes as something like ax. Okay, and again, if it's done that way, so rather than exposing all of matplotlib, we're exposing the pieces that are needed. This would now be ax dot axes. Over there, yes, that's right, axes over here, and then dot drag, because that pulls up in the IntelliSense quite nicely, drag pan, and therefore it might be clearer. So copy all of that, paste it here, and this line of code becomes therefore redundant. Now I'm just wondering if the alternative would be something like, well, possibly, if we said that ax, for example, or I'll just call it a for now, but it's equal to matplotlib dot, and then no, because again it doesn't put it up. So the best way of using matplotlib really is, if you're going to use these extra features, is and this is kind of like, because matplotlib basically is a larger module that contains many submodules, it's probably clearer to do it this way. Well, I don't want to break the code too much, but that code ran. But anyway, it's something about how you expose the methods and attributes, and I'm using VS Code over here. But nevertheless, that's kind of like, that was quite nice. That plot was quite nice, because I've not seen that type of thing before. There's tons of things that we can do in matplotlib. So, for example, if I go to matplotlib, how about matplotlib? So something like that. Over there, we can see all of our plot types, and there should be hundreds of these examples. I think maybe it'll be in basics. Let's have a look. Plot fields, stats, plots, examples. Yeah, okay, a whole bunch more. Like literally, I've been through this on another video, but hundreds and hundreds of different plots, and maybe that one was actually pulled out of there. So kind of like, yeah, just tons of these things are available. Like literally, I don't know. I'm kind of like even guessing at how many there are here, but possibly 100 or 200. So let's just move on, because the one thing is I'm just going to go back to the VS Code and stick with matplotlib, and it's a nice piece of code, nice block of code, which I actually commented on it, nice block of code, because I'll be using some of those features. I'm sure that I would be modifying all of these parts of this matplotlib so that this large module is broken down, so I could see the components, like these sub-modules that we're calling things from, and do it that way, so that the IntelliSense works and it's a little bit easier. And then you've got when you do it this way, you've also got kind of like when you hover your cursor over it, some rudimentary help that pops up, and it kind of like tells you how to use the function, which is quite nice. You've got the type hinting that's available. So just some things, I'm going to call it poor practice, but here if I hover over it, it just says this. Whereas again, I guess if I used, because it's at fig ax, I don't even know on this one, get current axes. It gets a little bit like questionable as what this is, and then you have to start going into the I don't know, either to the website to go to the official documentation to figure it out how it is, or going into one of these general pre-trained transformers like ChatGPT or Google Bard, or I'm now using Claude AI. But anyway, let's remove all of this, because really what I wanted to actually do on this particular video was just a basic matplotlib chart, and I did actually go to Claude AI I've used. So there's a whole bunch of different ones. I'll bring it up over here because I actually started doing it, but just because let's say plot a chart with a fig and ax, because basically in matplotlib quite often, so I'll zoom into this, it says the way that it's done in the documentation is two ways. Either you do a plot equals and then draw your plot, and that does one plot on a screen. But quite often in the documentation, if we do go to a matplotlib thing, maybe if I pull it up and click on one of these things somewhere, I don't know, just click on this. Let's have a look. Wonder where the actual part of it is. It's got this ax.plot that we see here, like the end. Then it's got a plot.show. Where is the fig and ax on this one? I'm not necessarily sure, but it's definitely got. Okay, something. This would be figure normally here, where the underscore is. The figure actually isn't being used in this particular case, but it actually says matplotlib figure pops up in a little pop-up, and here it's an ND array for the axes. But basically, this fig ax is a common pattern that you've seen. So this plot.subplots is a common pattern for the subplots. And so I picked a subplot one on purpose, actually, because there's two plots here. And the first one returns to the figure, and the question is what it is, and we'll see this. But the figure returns to this whole item, whereas this axis returns to each one of these kind of like sequentially. So you can sort of like set the different like things. So I guess here it's setting like possibly the color in the axes, like face color or something. It's possibly changing or something because it's got eye face color. So I imagine it's changing the blue and the orange potentially on that one. So we get this very common pattern here, and I can kind of like copy that and paste it into the code over into our VS Code. We see everything pops up quite nice with the colorization of it. So this is our common pattern, fig and axis, and here it does one plot. So it just does ax.plot, and there's only one axis over here. So we can kind of like run this by hitting F5 and running it, and a chart pops up and we get this plot. And you know, my first question is that this doesn't demonstrate very much, because we could have just done we didn't have to use the subplots, so we didn't have to do fig ax equals plot.subplots, because we've only got one thing in here. We could just done ax.plot. In fact, I wonder if, or just plot, so we could have removed this, therefore we didn't need the axes over here, and just I guess plot it then become, in fact this will be plot.plot, this will be plot.set label, I presume, or x, there we go, x label, I guess this would be plot y label. And to notice one thing that was different was we had set x label and set y label. Now it's just x label and y label. And over here we've got where its plot title is now be, or ax dot Control Z. Where it's ax.setTitle, now it's going to be, I'll do it on the line underneath, but plot dot, and it's going to be something like setTitle, I guess. Plot.title is a simple plot. So we can sort of like see the slight nuances. But if we're just doing one plot, I'll comment that one out just so we can see. If we're just doing one plot on its own, it's much simpler. It looks like that. And when we run it, we still get the same plot dot show, and it looks exactly the same. So we didn't get any advantage because we did this axis. So, like, what is this axis thing? We said this axis is if we wanted a second chart on there. So let's kind of like go and have a demonstration of that. So this is our setup, the fig, ax, subplots, and so forth, but it didn't do anything. It kind of like tells us underneath the componentry bits, using the figure and axis provides full control over each part of the plot. You can customize the figure, size, axis, plot, labels, and so forth. So I prompt or put in this little question here, this question as a prompt. What is a difference between the fig and the ax part? And the fig, it says it represents the overall figure, so the whole big thing. So like, you know, we can imagine that this is the figure here. And the axis represents a specific axis for where the plot is drawn. So now we might only draw one plot, but we might draw 4 plots. So we might do this, for example, something that looks like this. And there's 4 plots, and we have to now have a method of a matplotlib provides this, like this is plot number 1, to like how do we differentiate these plots, or these are now called axes 3 and 4. So this main thing here is the plot, PLT for plot, and each one here, each one of these is an axis. So this is ax1, AX1, and this is AX2, and this one here is axis 3, and finally this one here is axis 4. So some way matplotlib gives us this functionality of segregating the axes and doing different things to the axes compared to the whole main plot. And I presume if we did plot.title, when we had, I wonder, I don't even know, but I presume if we did plot.title, plot.setTitle in our, so if I do jump back, if I was to have kind of like this axis set title and then plot dot title in the same thing where we had the fig, or at least fig dot title. So I wonder if that was available, but something like fig dot title, no, it doesn't offer it, because I was just imagining if we could do that. But the fig and the axes do have different things that are available in them. So that's basically what it is. And then it gives us, so in summary, fig is your overall figure containing figure or container for everything. So we can think of it as that big container. Any ax is, or the axes are like the instances inside it. So some key points, the plot.subplots creates so the subplots gives us this option to have a figure and an axes object. That's what it literally has in it. So this subplots thing over here gives us back a tuple, and our tuple, the first item is the figure and the second item is the axis. That's what it literally gives us back in the code. The figure has a methods for overall figure shapes and sizes, dot per inches and so forth, and the axis controls the spines, labels and ticks for the inner plot. Now, when we had our plot here and just one axis, which was just this, that's kind of like why we had no advantage, because it was just one axis in there, and then you might as well just do a plot.show because it's just one thing. That's effectively the difference in it, unless there's some extra kind of features between the figure and the plot. So then I do provide example, because the example that we had up here doesn't really demonstrate very much, because we had exactly that. We had one figure with one axis inside it and nothing else. So what happens if we want to have like 2 axes? How do we do this? And I'm just going to do copy code here because it's there. But what it's got here, we can now see an ax1 over here, and we can see an ax2 over here. So these 2 axes have been created Let me hit undo, because and undo again. I'll do it here. So we've got this figure, create the figure, and then we've got our axes. So this is just one way of doing it, but there we go. The normal way is just figure, comma, ax equals subplots and define it like that. But we're making these subplots, and we can see something actually in the comments over here, which is add a subplot with 2 rows. Okay, so we're going to have 2 rows, 1 column, and this one's the first one. So here's the 2 rows, then it's 1 column, and this is the first position. And notice that this one here is the same 2 rows. Well, it must be 2 rows, because if it's 2 rows, it's containing both. 1 column. So we specify, do we want them vertically aligned? So, and then finally, like this bit here, and I'll put a little square around it. This is position number 2. So it's really a question of how we want. So imagine that we've got our figure that's set up here. Is how we want to set up our axes in different definitions. So this is saying now 2 rows. And this one here is number 1, position number 1. So it's saying do something like this. That's position number 1, which is ax 1. I'll call it the axes here. We can understand that the blue ones are axes by my drawing. And this one here is axis number 2. So this is a big fat number 2. This is axis number 2 over there. So do that. So this one gets drawn here, and this one gets drawn here in the grand scheme of a plot. So now we can do like multiple items in it. Now, if we didn't want to do one with multiple items, we just do a plot and a plot.show for just one thing if it was more simplistic. So again, I will get rid of that because we don't need it. I already have copied this code, but I'll just do it a second time just in case. And we go back over here and paste this over here, and now try and run our code. So if I hit F5 to run it, we should get 2 axes that comes down, and it looks something like this. Now it's very simplistic because all it's done is 1 line here, and we can see the 1 line here is 1 2 3. So all it's done is this 1 2 3 there. It's done in scaling or whatever, and this one's done 4 5 6. And we can kind of like, I guess, maybe pull it down and see, but they're kind of like segregated. But I guess the one thing that we see is we've got this ax1.title, which I presume is ax1.setTitle here, and somewhere, so the figures title, and that's what I was trying to achieve before, but now it's set in a different way. So our figure title over here has actually come from this line of code that set the figure title, which is, remember, like this is the whole like bigger picture from the fig. Fig is plot.figure, and the axes now are segregated from each other. So our axis title was set down here, and that's kind of like the best example. Our axis title and our axis labels actually. So ax1.label is x1, which is this bit here, and ax1.title is our little title here. And likewise for our x2 bit, it's over here and over here. So we can see how we can now segregate all of these bits. And if I was to sort of like draw it, so I'll just do an undo 4 times. 1 2 3 4. You know, this is our first axis over here that we can kind of like see. You can imagine it. And this is our second axis over here, and our whole plot is basically, or our whole figure is over here. So that's our fig, and these 2 inside are inner axes. So that's basically like a really crude but visual version of matplotlib and the difference between the figures and the axes. So now we can draw multiple charts if we want, and we can understand at least the documentation for drawing multiple charts, or if we wanted to do a single chart. Now we know what the difference is with a plot.show or a fig ax equals plot.subplots. So we can do subplots, and we can do one chart, and now we can do multiple charts on the same figure in matplotlib. And I think that's basically the end of this little video. If that was useful, if it helped you with your chart plotting and your data science and all the rest of it, follow, like, subscribe, and all the rest of it. If there's any comments, or if there's anything that you could have done better, or something that you think that was done wrong in some way, then also point that out. And that's it. Thanks for watching.